Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of Tiebreak Sports. Thanks for joining us. This is Aaron Kumar, and I'm delighted to say once again I'm joined by my good friend, the editor of Cricket World, John Pennington. John, how are you doing today?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks, Aaron. I apologise to listeners if my voice sounds a bit different. I have a little bit of a chest infection, so I'm sort of battling through. But good to be on the show again.
Oh, I hope you feel better, John, but we'll keep improvising if we do, won't we, John? We'll keep hanging in there. John, just very briefly, I mean, quite a bit's happened in the last week with regards to sport. I think since we last spoke, we had the T20 on Sunday with England and India. Obviously, that tour's now finished. A bit of a nail biter there, wasn't it, JP?
It was. I had some of my colleagues went to that game, and it was the only game they went to all year. And I said to them, I think you picked the right game to go to because it went right down to the wire. 2020 just sort of freed England up. Owen Morgan batted outstandingly well, and then freed Virat Kohli up as well. Couldn't score a run throughout the summer, then came out and scored 60 odd in no time. So a wonderful game. Obviously, Dhoni couldn't quite finish it off at the end. I don't blame him for trying to do that because 8 times out of 10 he will finish a game off, and on this occasion it didn't quite happen for him. Credit to Chris Woakes. Got to chat to Chris Woakes the day after. He was understandably very pleased with what had happened on the day as well. So a really good game. A shame that it was marred by the booing of Moeen Ali. That's really not on, but hopefully we can all move on from that and it won't happen again. But it's a shame that happened. The response from the PCA wasn't very good either. The ECB didn't seem to come out and say anything either. So it was a shame that the game itself was fantastic, and obviously England very, very pleased to have ended what was an up and down summer, it has to be said, with a win, and they sort of look ahead now to the World Cup.
No, absolutely, JP. And I just want to agree with you on the booing. I think there's, whoever you support or whatever it is, there's no place for that in cricket. I wrote a piece earlier in the week, and what I basically said was that whoever we support, whatever our team is, whatever our allegiance is to, we've all got one united passion, and that's to this great sport. And ultimately, it is a sport that unites and brings people together. And bullying and any kind of hatred, I think there's no place for that in sport whatsoever. So that's you're absolutely right on that. With regards to Dhoni, I did see he was getting a little bit of stick for that last over. I don't blame him whatsoever because he's proven himself to be such a world-class finisher, hasn't he, in limited overs cricket. And he backs himself. He shows so much confidence. I was watching a clip, I think it was the Selcon Cup last year against Sri Lanka. There were 9 wickets down, and by himself he scored 15 off the last over. He's done this stuff in the past. In that situation, there's always an element of risk, but if it comes off, then people would have been saying he's a hero, so you can't really fault him the 1 or 2 times it doesn't come off.
No, it's very much the nature of 2020 cricket. More often than not, it goes down to the wire. Some days the bowler's going to win, and some days the batsman. You can't win them all. As you say, he's done, you picked a good example there. I've watched him time and again do it for Chennai in IPL, Champions League cricket.
Yes, exactly.
And he took his credit, he came out and said, that was my decision, it didn't work, it's my fault. So I absolutely all credit to him.
Yeah, completely. I think that's one thing you have to give credit to Dhoni. He does get some criticism at times, maybe in test matches, his captaincy could be a bit more proactive, and maybe rightly so at times, but he always does stand by a decision. He doesn't back away from it. He took, as you say, he took the responsibility. It didn't work, but he held his hands up and said, I tried this, and that's how it is, you move on from there. But as you say, it was kind of it was a good tour, and I know it had its moments at times, but both teams probably had their ups, had their downs throughout the test and the 1 days, and now all attention lies ahead to the World Cup.
Yes, absolutely. It was, very much sort of up and down for both teams, trying to sort of come back from deficits and do that sort of thing. What about moving on to another sport now? What about the tennis? We did a preview ahead of the US Open final. Both of us went for Marin Cilic to win, and he did so, and it looked relatively comfortable. I'd say comfortable in sort of inverted commas, I suppose. A fairly routine win, maybe.
It was, JP. You kind of felt that we did say if Cilic could maintain the level he showed against Roger Federer, which was frankly one of the best displays of hardcourt tennis I've seen in a long, long time. It was comparable to Del Potro in 2009 US Open or Federer himself in 05-06. It was clean serving, not many unforced errors, lots of winners. But to his credit, his first Grand Slam final, he replicated that kind of form against Nishikori. And to be fair to Nishikori, he did have quite a few long matches in a row against Raonic and Wawrinka. And the match with Djokovic wasn't a 5-setter, but emotionally it was quite a draining match. I don't know how much he had left in the tank, and it was probably just too much for him in his first Grand Slam final. But it's and to Cilic's credit, he did come out and say that kind of what we talked about last week. He's almost been the beneficiary of Nadal maybe out injured, Murray's not quite back to his best. There are some openings, there's some opportunities in tennis, but to his credit, he's been one of those guys that's been able to break the door down and take it. And he said that Wawrinka winning the Australian Open this year in January has given a lot of the sort of second tier, if you will, guys the belief that they can now step up and win majors. So I think we've got a very exciting next year ahead of us with Cilic now Grand Slam champion.
Yeah, and I think moving ahead, it's going to be quite important for him, I suppose, to sort of stay fit and at the top of his game, because you touched on Del Potro, though. He struggled so much with injuries, and he's out again, isn't he? He's going to miss the part of the season after winning that US Open. We sort of, had we been doing this back then, I think we would have been having the same conversation. Oh, you know, it's good to have another major winner, and will they kick on? He unfortunately hasn't been able to, but now with Cilic and Wawrinka, then yeah, it could be very exciting to have, you know, more than just a top 3, top 4 for the next few years.
Absolutely, JP, and as you say, that has been the big thing with Del Potro. I think he's only made one Slam semi-final since he won that US Open 5 years ago, but there's no question about the guy's talent. He's beaten all of the sort of big four since winning that US Open. Time and time, he gave Djokovic a real scare in the Wimbledon semi-finals last year, took him to 5 sets, and it was a great match. But yeah, as you say, it's and to a lesser extent, the same with Wawrinka. He's not really had injury, but he's been so up and down since winning the Australian Open that when many people thought he was going to kick on and be a contender in every event, and it's almost like there's a responsibility, a level of responsibility that comes with being a Grand Slam champion. There's expectations from the fans, from the people who turn up to watch the games in the other tournaments throughout the year. So it'll be very interesting to see how Cilic now deals with that. His life is not going to be the same in terms of tennis now or otherwise from here on in.
And we've also got the Davis Cup semi-finals going on this week. I noticed that Switzerland, as you'd expect, made a pretty good start to their clash. Can you give us an update, a bit more information?
Yeah, I mean, just a bit. I'm sure most of our tennis fans will all be aware of the Davis Cup. I find it a fascinating concept, JP. There are other things like the Hopman Cup, but it is the main team event in tennis. It was actually started back in 1899. You had 4 guys from Harvard University who wanted to challenge the British, and Dwight Davis was one of those 4, and the LTA agreed, and he's the one who designed the trophy that we now have, the famous Davis Cup trophy. So it started off just the USA versus Britain. He designed the concept, and then gradually you had France, Australasia, and some other teams, and some joining in. And some of the top players these days don't necessarily embrace it as much, some do, but I think a lot of players love the Davis Cup. They feel it's their one chance to play for their country. And Switzerland, moving on to Switzerland, it's fascinating because Federer, for all his greatness, for all the slams he's won, it looked to be the one title that he would not win. And it's no fault of Federer's, but because Davis Cup tends to reward depth in a squad. Spain, although they went out first round this year, they're always there or thereabouts usually, because you have 4 or 5 guys in the top 20, which means that you can go anywhere in the world and be competitive. You could even rest David Ferrer, a number 6 guy in the world, bring in someone like a Verdasco who's going to be good on quicker hard court surfaces, and you'll be competitive. Federer's pretty much been a one-man show, and he's, to be honest, skipped a lot of Davis Cup because he's kind of felt that there wasn't really a chance of progression. Suddenly this year, although we talked just now about Wawrinka being a bit up and down, you've now got a second world-class player. They're number 3 and 4 in the world. Now it's a big ask because you're asking 2 men to do basically 4 people's work, because the squad's usually 4 people, but they've come to the semi-finals. They're 2-0 up now in their semi against Italy, and the Italians are a good team. They beat Britain in the quarters, but very good in their own clay court conditions, but this is a fast sort of indoor court, and it'll be very interesting to see whether Switzerland do go ahead and actually play Federer and Wawrinka today, or they could give them a rest. My suspicion is they'll play them and try and finish off the tie today, and then they'll be in the final against, it'll be their first time in the final since '92, and they would face France, who likely France were 2-0 up. So yeah, very interesting, and that could be the one thing that sort of Federer's been holding on for, isn't it? I mean, that could be an amazing thing if Switzerland could win the Davis Cup finally at this stage of his career.
Switzerland back in 1992, that they sort of was blimey, who were they playing for them then? Sort of D4?
I think that was before Federer turned professional. I believe it was against the USA. From memory, I think Marc Rosset, I don't know if you remember, he was like the last Swiss sort of ATP Tour winner. He was just winding down, the tall left-hander, just winding down as Federer had been coming onto the tour. I think they might have played once or twice when Federer was very young. But
interesting. Oh, sorry, carry on.
No, go ahead, JP.
No, I was just sort of going to say, you mentioned there that, yeah, sorry, I must correct myself, Guy Forget was French, so he certainly wouldn't have played for Switzerland in 1992, just check that one up. You mentioned there that the Davis Cup gives tennis players the opportunity to play for their country, and another big event we've got coming up in a couple of weeks is, of course, the Ryder Cup,
Yes.
which is obviously the sort of kind of equivalent, but not quite in golf, which I absolutely love, because you've got the best of Europe taking on the best of America,
Sure.
and, one-on-one and two, doubles, sort of doubles and singles, if you like. So that's a sort of similar sort of thing coming to its conclusion as well. So yeah, plenty of sort of that sort of competition going on at the moment.
Absolutely, and you say much like the Ryder Cup, it is very nice when both are very individualistic sports for a lot of the year, and when players are getting the opportunity to play for their country or play for their continent, in some cases in the Ryder Cup, I think it is it's a different dynamic for the fans, for the players, and it really gives us a chance to see, not that they're not passionate the rest of the year, but I just think it's a different kind of passion, isn't it? And it's nice to see that sometimes.
Absolutely.
And well, JP, yeah, so that's been a lot of tennis happening this week, hasn't it, with the US Open and obviously with the Davis Cup, and obviously we'll keep you posted on the Davis Cup next week. But I wanted to ask you about, I know you're a big follower of the F1, and there's been some news that's come out recently about there's going to be a block on, I believe, like with a radio, with the communication between the teams and the drivers.
Yeah, what they're doing, I mean, they do a lot of communication between the pit wall and the drivers, obviously, say, right, come into the pits, do this, do that. But what they're trying to crack down is giving sort of what they're calling driving advice. So saying, right, your teammate's doing this in this corner, so you do that. And it's almost, in some respects, I think it's a good move, because the drivers, I think, they prefer just to, particularly some of them, Kimi Raikkonen and Lewis Hamilton, just to leave me alone and let me drive. So I think in that respect, it's probably a good move, because you want to see the drivers almost show their skills, not being coached round by the pit wall. I think that's a good move. But the issue with it that's become like, there's two things. First of all, inevitably, the teams will find a way of sending coded messages out. So that is going to happen. Whether the FIA say they can police it or not, they will do it. And secondly, if you've got a situation where the cars, they know what stage sort of the brakes or tyre wear is, and it's getting dangerous, there's a possibility they can't communicate that problem to the driver and say, look, you need to ease up in this corner because you're putting too much pressure on the tyres, and that could result in an accident. That's an issue that they've got to think about. So there's some plus points and some negative points. I think generally the reception has not been that good for it, primarily because of that, and I think teams will always try to get around these sort of things. I don't know whether it will actually have all that much difference, but it's an interesting one, because they're all obviously thinking about how do we make this a better spectacle. It's coming from a lot of criticism this year with the new entrants not sounding as good as they used to, and that they obviously, Mercedes being so far out ahead of the front, you haven't got as much of a team battle to the title. But yeah, it's interesting to see how it plays out, and obviously coming in towards the end of the season as well. So yeah, just to add everything to throw to the mix, it does get very interesting towards the end of the year.
Brilliant, yeah. So it sounds like what you're saying is that there are some good points about these new developments, but there are some things that potentially may need to be ironed out. You're saying, isn't it, JP? Just to make sure, like what you made is a very good point there about how, what if there's a problem with the car or something something with the elements they need to get across to the driver. How is that going to be done? So yeah, there are, I guess, some things that need to be ironed out there, isn't it?
Yeah, like anything, we'll see how it plays out, because they quite often make changes, and as the season goes on, they just tweak it, and well, that's okay, that's not, and teams will push and push and push, like you do in any professional sport. You push the boundaries until you find, okay, we can't do that, so you sort of go, you push it as far as you can until you don't get caught, sort of thing. So that's what's going to happen.
Absolutely. Well, JP, I know you've been with The Voice and you're recovering, but thank you so much for your time today. And guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to keep tweeting us your questions, and a couple more weeks to go with your sporting comeback, so keep those coming in. And let us know what you think about what we've talked about today and about these new changes with Formula One. We'd love to hear from you. So thanks a lot, and see you again soon.